This year's G7 summit of the world's major economies is underway in the Sicilian coastal city of Taormina. The leaders spent the morning at an ancient Greek amphitheater. RT's Peter Oliver is following the lavish summit in Taormina for us.
Well, it's all underway and it's all kicked off here at the G7 in Sicily for 2017. What we've seen is a number of new leaders arriving here. Many of them have raised a few eyebrows in the manner of which they've arrived here in Sicily. It's quite a remote bit of coastline on the Mediterranean where we are. We saw Emmanuel Macron, the new French president, arrive in a rather humble jet in comparison, certainly, to the grandiose Air Force One that brought Donald Trump here. Bear in mind, Angela Merkel took a minibus winding around the mountainous roads here of Sicily. But what we also saw was the leaders of the EU institutions starting out with a few gags.
I'm happy to be here. Was that for me?
You're too loud.
There are 4 new leaders around the table. So Donald must help. We are the only stable elements in the international landscape.
The only veterans.
We are veterans, but we are not old.
A bit of levity there from the EU Council President and the President of the EU Commission. However, what we have seen, as you always see at G7 summits, is demonstrators come out. What we have seen today is those demonstrators gather together, donning masks of those leaders and scoffing down, essentially, what appears to be some form of spaghetti dish. What they were protesting about was the lack of effort that they see that these rich nations are doing in order to end world hunger. But there's one leader who's cost this town rather more than it probably expected when it took on the role of hosting this year's G7. That's Donald Trump. As an Italian military jet passes overhead, laying down a plume of yellow smoke as it goes by, it's fair to say security here in Sicily ahead of this year's G7 is about as tight as it gets. If we look just behind me here, you'll be able to see soldiers on the streets there. Now, they're actually blocking off the main road up towards Taormina. That's completely closed off to everybody. That's for the delegations and the G7 leaders themselves. The security is incredibly visible and incredibly tight. While organisers have been bending over backwards to make sure that the leaders and their delegations are well looked after, one member of the group has been a little more demanding than the others. You guessed it, it's the Donald. President Trump's car is too wide for the ancient streets of Taormina, his motorcade too long for them. So, in order to sort that problem out, they've widened the streets, laid new roads in some places. Around 14 million euros worth of public works having to be carried out, which has caused great irritation to the local residents here in Taormina over the past few weeks and months. It's led the mayor to say that he's become the most hated man in town for bringing the G7 here. Even after all that, Mr. Trump might not even spend a single night in Taormina. While other leaders are expected to stay at the very swish San Domenico hotel where the meetings are taking place, it's understood that the US president may commute via helicopter from a nearby US airbase. Even Italian ice cream hasn't gone without receiving a Trump twist in this particular part of Sicily. One local gelato purveyor has created a star-spangled banner affair, topped off with a thatch of orange hair woven out of the frozen sweet treat. However, no chance of a taste of that for me. That's inside the secure zone. In fact, a lot of places outside of that secure zone where we're all allowed decided to close their doors for the next couple of days. So no gelato for me right now. Peter Oliver, RT Sicily.
Well, for more than half of the leaders, this G7 will be their first. That's, of course, Donald Trump, Theresa May, France's Emmanuel Macron and the Italian Prime Minister Paolo Gentiloni. However, the agenda of this meeting is nothing out of the ordinary.
The G7. They bill themselves as the world's most important industrially advanced countries. They meet to discuss the world's major issues and to devise solutions. They've been at this for a while now, decades in fact. Back in 1989, the summit was dominated by the economy, the hardships faced by the poorest countries, and the environment. Judging by this year's agenda, the G7's frozen in time. Looks like seven's neither a lucky number nor a big enough number when it comes to devising solutions.
I don't see that they accomplish very much. It started off in the early 1970s. It's a very narrow group of countries that takes part. And in terms of its agenda, the G7 has failed spectacularly.
But what about the G7's claim to being economic powerhouses? Well, back in '89, they together sat on just over half of global GDP, whereas now it's more like a third.
The whole point of having these industrial powerhouses to meet was to ensure that the United States and the key Western European powers and Japan maintain their economic strength.
Something that's not gone unnoticed, by China especially.
China is obviously the rising economic power. So it really is rather absurd that here are these self-appointed, very important group of countries that supposedly will dictate the economic future of the universe. And they really, some of these countries are real economic lightweights, while the real economic giant, the economic elephant, China, doesn't take part.
The UK steps up security across the country after the Manchester terror attack. We'll bring you more details on that after this short break. Stay with us.